This is our presentation on social media as a source of news. I did want to say that my name is Ben, this is Tommy. We also have George and Charlie. We're missing Garrett, so there is one body gone.
And with that being said, we were going to want to start off with a few questions from you guys and just raise your hand if you feel this applies to you. Who here gets their news from social media? And how many of you would you say watch television or read the newspaper to also get news?
Online articles count too for newspapers.
And out of you guys, not depending on what source you use, do you believe your source is a reliable news source all the time? All right, none of you rose your hand for that.
One in the back is kind of.
With that being said, our topic is social media as a source of news. As you can see, traditional media is now versing new media in the technology world. Originally, most people got their news from sources like radio and newspaper, with television developing later. But with these platforms or mediums of news, these were they have very regulated rules on what they will publish, what they will show on TV. And coming around in the late 90s to early 2000s, apps like Facebook and Twitter, with the introduction of social media, have made it easier to broadcast news faster to a larger crowd of people, which you were not able to do before. We are going to dive into why people are choosing their news medium due to their gender, age, income, and location. We are diving into this subject because we believe this is a problem that we face greatly today, especially with COVID and what has happened this past summer. Fake news is very unreliable and a very prevalent thing in all of our lives today. With that being said, the research in this presentation will dive into what news sources university students use, as well as if any demographic aspects correlate. This will lead into deciding the amount of time spent on these mediums that could correlate to create a user bias. With that being said, we'll dive into our questions we'll be asking in our survey to get this information, what our survey plan is and how we will conduct to get this information, and what our sample plan will be. With that being said, I'm going to pass it to Ben to talk about the questions.
Yeah, so for our questions, we have 6 total questions, and we broke it up into 3 tiers. So the first tier is just going to be our usage per day. We did group television and newspaper together just because they're older mediums. We also have social media. So we do have an option. If you don't watch any, we don't have a none, but we have a less than 1 hour. On the extreme end, we also have above 6 hours. So we wanted to be pretty inclusive. And we didn't want to say above 15 hours and target anybody who might have extreme use. But anyway, tier 2, that's going to be what specific sources of these do you actually choose? This was kind of complicated because there are a ton of sources, so we put in the most popular ones. And we did separate 2. We did not put TV and newspaper together. We thought it'd be fair just to split it up. That way, for anybody who may have selected it in the first option, maybe they don't do both. So we wanted to make that pretty clear. We also have a write-in box, so if there's something you don't see but you really do use, we really would like to know for that. If you don't use it, you can click none. Why are these important though? This kind of relates to our last, because once you have the hour usage and you have your sources, at that point we'll ask you to rate, is it credible, is it likable, or is it believable? So we have a tier, kind of on the far side, is it completely unbelievable or is it completely believable? And that's the theme, at least for the third question, or third tier. The reason why we want to ask these questions, we want to see if there's user bias or consistency. So a great example for the user bias, if you have almost no hours reported for any of your use, you maybe selected one or just a couple sources, but you think the believability and likability are extremely high. You kind of answered it right there for yourself. You are not really getting a good range of information, and you're not really referencing other stuff. So you're in a very secluded, kind of like an echo chamber. The consistency is going to be really important too, because if you spend all of your time watching something and you click all of the sources, but you believe all of them to be credible and believable, that also doesn't really add up, just because if you're reviewing everything, many channels have different ideas and different beliefs, and they target different types of people, so it's not very consistent. So this is our questions portion. I'm going to be passing it along for the survey.
Perfect, thank you, Ben. So going off what Ben had said, just talking about the survey real quick. So we're going to start off with the introduction, and that's going to kind of go over the main theme of our survey, as well as allow the participant to kind of get accustomed to like the consent, make sure everything's going well, and if they want to do it. Then it's going to go into kind of time spent on media, time spent on specific media, and then again going over the credibility, likability, and believability of each of those sources. And then the second tier kind of talks about those demographic questions along with a few others to kind of see if there's any other aspects of one's life that can affect what they perceive as credible. Next page, please. So the survey plan. So as all of you guys know, we started off in Qualtrics, which is an online survey program which makes the survey and allows it to be sent out to the participants. The participants being, as a population, university students across the United States, and then we're going to kind of put that into the sample of Northern Michigan University students. And as I think it was Tom that talked about it, being at a university kind of allows diversity of itself, because I'm sure all of you aren't from Marquette, Michigan. I mean, some of you may, but not all, and so that kind of adds a little diversity. And then it'll be sent through email to these participants, as well as like social media platforms being like Instagram or Facebook DM, or even like a Snapchat message. Sent by our group to pretty much a university student. So with population being big, it can be sent to as many people as wanted. We kind of came up with a 3-week waiting period to get back the results to use for this. We thought that was pretty reasonable, maybe like a week for us to kind of get as many of them sent out, and then gives the participant, enough time to finish it. So all that information is going to go back into Qualtrics when they're sent back, and then from there we're going to put it into the IMB SPSS statistics, where the data will then be analyzed.
All right, so for our sample plan, we chose to do just Northern Michigan University students, minimum of 100 and a maximum of 250, because we thought that would be a good number to kind of judge on, and wouldn't be too many to overload us in the data. Demographic questions will be used, such as age, sex, marital status, and your residing state. Go to the next slide. And then in conclusion, basically looking for which media sources all of you guys use, which ones you use the most, which ones you use the least, and which ones you find to be the most reliable. Again, sample size of 100 to 250 students. Again, as Tommy stated in the beginning, most people kind of before our generation used traditional media, and we expect us as students to use newer media. We're going to examine all the survey results to find different trends and differences in all the answers, and will be used in further research on student media usage.
that's all it for our presentation, but there's one last thing I wanted to add, and I think it's pretty interesting. I mean, with our age demographic, you kind of already have an idea of what we're gonna use. Just because the adoption for social media and phones is right now, it's probably most prevalent in our age group. But really the overall question is, are you using it because you like it, or do you like it because you use it? And this is with regard to news source. And now we're open for any questions.